Well, absolutely, quite a number of issues really being addressed here, from development in the African continent, especially at these very critical times where the global uncertainty, the ever-changing landscape. But really to explore this right here in Gaborone in Botswana, we're joined here now by, of course, Mr. Ahunna Eziakonwa, Assistant Secretary General and Director of UNDP for the regional in the Bureau of Africa. So once again, ma'am, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Lovely. Let's talk about the importance of this gathering, especially because we have quite a number of programs in place to address the challenges facing the African continent. But what are we trying to achieve here?
Well, first of all, I think it's really a pleasure that we're able to lead this as UNDP, along with our partners from AFDB and ECA. First is to establish the importance of coming together. Really key. We're institutions all trying to do the same thing on the continent, but often we work in parallel. We sort of are in our own silos. So one imperative here is that we're establishing a new voice, which is African institutions working on the African continent must come together and tackle the challenges together. Because when we bring all our different assets, minds together, we're more likely to achieve success. Second is where it's happening, Botswana. It really is important to register what's just happened in Botswana this past month with the elections and the peaceful transition of power. I think what we're trying to also feature here is that Africa needs this kind of strong governance systems to be able to build a foundation for development. We need to avoid the political instability that has engulfed a lot of places, because without stability, we cannot begin to talk about solving these issues. So we want to also feature that element. And thirdly is the focus on our young researchers, because often African researchers are actually ignored, but we want to showcase the brilliance that comes out of our African learning, researchers, the learning institutions, and they are the ones coming up with the homegrown solutions that we need to take back to apply. And I think lastly is the urgency. We want to really sound a note here of urgency that, the world is in disarray. And a lot of what's happening in that landscape is affecting Africa's own trajectory. So Africa needs to take stock and actually pause and say, what is the impact that this uncertainty, this global disruption, this tornado that we see around the world, the wars that are happening in Europe, in the Middle East, what impact does that have on Africa? And how does that trigger us making a bigger push for accelerating our development and sort of navigating this?
Let's look at the support, for example, from UNDP to the African continent. We talk about sustainable development goals, but in the midst of all of this, we see the rise of trade protectionism, where we see the rise of the extreme politics. And in fact, I think during your address, you really lauded Botswana for having this transition, where you said it's almost like a rare commodity to have such developments. But let's look at the support for the African continent from UNDP's perspective.
Well, one of the areas where UNDP actually focuses on is on good governance. And I think this is so critical, as I said. We need leadership on the continent that has the courage, the character, the competence, and leadership that cares. Because if you look at whether you're talking about South Africa or you're talking about Nigeria or other countries on this continent, there's hardly any African country that doesn't have the natural wealth to make prosperity happen for all. So why is it that we're where we are today? And I think it's largely because we haven't paid attention to the importance of having the right leadership approach to, managing Africa's resources. And as a result, we've seen a lot of exit of capital from the continent. And then Africa goes out with a begging bowl. But there's actually more resources leaving the continent than coming in. So that's, I think, one of the things that we are trying to do in countries is to help governments build the right institutions, but also establish the right accountability systems, where whatever resources you have, you should be able to account for them. You should be able to deploy them in such a way that those resources are working for the benefit of the people.